Maggie had never worked a day in her life. She didn't have to. At 47 years old, she still lived in the big house her parents bought a long time ago, floating through life with their money. Everything she had, her car, her fancy bags, even the overpriced coffee she drank every morning, was paid for by them. Yet, she walked around like a queen, thinking she was better than anyone who wasn't part of her special world. Her days were the same every day. She woke up late, spent hours looking at Instagram, Snapchat, and Twitter, and then met her HLA friends for their daily gossip session. The women Maggie hung out with were just like her, spoiled, nosy, and obsessed with controlling every little thing in their rich neighborhood. They loved giving out fines for silly stuff, like grass being too long, houses being too noisy, trash cans staying out too long, or holiday decorations not coming down on time. It wasn't really about keeping things neat, it was about having power. Then Tom moved in. From the second she saw him, Maggie had a problem. A young black man in his late 30s moving into her neighborhood, acting like he belonged there? She hated it. But what really bothered her wasn't Tom himself. It was the piglet. A cute white piglet that followed him everywhere, wagging its tail happily. To Maggie, it was all wrong. The pig, a pure breed shote, was too nice to belong to him. People like Tom, she thought, didn't have fancy pets like that. In her mind, he must have either stolen it or got it through some shady deal. This idea grew in her head, turning her dislike for Tom into real hate. The HOI meetings became her time to complain. "I just don't trust him," she whispered to her friends one evening, stirring her iced coffee for effect. "Did you see that pig? Bet you anything it was stolen." Her friends, just as petty, agreed. One of them, Linda, smirked. You could do something about it." And just like that, an idea came to Maggie. She wasn't used to things not going her way. When she wanted something, she got it. If she didn't like something, she found a way to get rid of it. And in her mind, Tom, a black man, couldn't just have that piglet like that. In fact, he didn't belong. That evening, watching Tom play in his yard with the husky mix, her fingers hovered over her phone screen. One call was all it would take. A little act of being a worried neighbor with a bit of overdone panic in her voice. She knew the right words. Maggie smiled to herself and dialed 911. Maggie's voice got sharp right away when the dispatcher picked up. "Yes, I need to report a suspicious man in my neighborhood," she said, making sure to sound out of breath like she had just seen something scary. "He's acting strange, and I think he might have stolen a beautiful pig. It's a pure breed shote. Expensive, I don't feel safe." She knew exactly what she was doing. Years of getting what she wanted had taught her how to trick people, especially grown-ups in charge. She didn't really think Tom was dangerous, but she knew the right words would bring the police to his door quickly to arrest him. In just a few minutes, a police car arrived at Tom's house. Maggie watched from her window, a smug smile on her face as she saw two officers walk up to his door. That'll show him, she thought. But things didn't happen the way she planned. Tom answered the door looking calm, clearly puzzled by the police showing up out of nowhere. His little pig trotted up next to him, tail wagging, not understanding the tension. "Sir, we got a call saying you might have stolen this pig," one of the officers said, looking at Tom. Tom looked shocked. "Stolen?" "No, this is my pig. His name's Frankie. I have all the paperwork if you need to see it." One of the officers sighed. "Yeah, that'd be great. We just need to make sure everything's okay." Maggie's smile dropped as she watched from afar. She hadn't thought he would have proof. Tom went back inside, coming out with adoption papers, vet records, and even pictures from the breeder. The officers barely glanced at them before they knew the truth. "All right, everything checks out," the first officer said, handing Tom back his papers. "Sorry for the trouble, sir. We just had to check on the call." Tom looked past them and saw Maggie standing on her porch, arms crossed. He had guessed it was her when he saw the cops, and now, with the way she was looking at him, he was certain. I'd really like to know who made this call, he said, his voice calm. The officers looked at each other. We can't say, one of them said, but his slight pause told Tom everything he needed to know. Maggie, realizing she'd been found out, turned around quickly and went inside. Tom watched her go, shaking his head. He'd only been in the neighborhood for less than a month, and already someone was trying to get him in trouble. If Maggie was going to snoop into his life, then maybe it was time to see what she was hiding. It didn't take long to find what he was looking for. Tom wasn't the type to let things go. Being falsely accused of stealing his own pig wasn't just annoying, it was a warning. He'd seen people like Maggie before, the kind who thought they ruled the world, who believed they could decide who should or shouldn't be around. He was sure that if she got another chance, she'd pull something like this again. So he decided to do some research. It didn't take much work. A quick search of her name took him right to her public Twitter account. Maggie wasn't very good with technology. Scrolling through her posts, he saw the usual entitlement. Complaints about janitors, baristas messing up her coffee order, rants about how nobody wants to work anymore, and lots of passive-aggressive HOA drama. But as he looked deeper, things got even worse. Maggie wasn't just an entitled busybody, she was openly racist. Hidden in the pages she liked and the groups she was in, Tom found several private forums where Maggie and her HOA friends talked about targeting Black and Native American neighbors. They bragged about making life hard for them, reporting them for made-up rules, and even telling landlords not to rent to certain people, especially Black folks. Tom clenched his jaw while reading their posts. These women treated racism like a hobby, something they did between brunches and therapy sessions. And now, he was their new target. The next time Maggie saw him, she didn't even try to hide her attitude. She walked past his driveway while he was watering his lawn, her arms crossed. "Guess you got lucky that time," she muttered, loud enough for him to hear. Tom didn't bite. Instead, he turned to her with a calm smile. "I was thinking about luck today," he said. "Like how lucky I was to find your Twitter pages." Maggie stopped, her face twitching, the color draining from it. "Yeah," Tom continued. "The ones where you and your HOA friends talk about getting rid of neighbors like me, Black people, and all other Native Americans." Sound familiar? Maggie's mouth opened, then closed. She looked like a fish out of water, trying to find something to say. "See, here's the thing," Tom said, stepping closer. "I'm not the kind of person you can just scare away. I'm not leaving. And if you ever pull something like that 911 stunt again, I'll make sure everyone in this neighborhood knows what kind of person you really are." Maggie didn't say anything. She just turned and stormed off. Inside, she was fuming. How dare he talk to her like that? He had embarrassed her, backed her into a corner. And if there was one thing Maggie couldn't stand, it was losing. So she decided to teach him a lesson. Maggie spent the next 2 days thinking about what Tom said. She barely slept, her mind full of revenge ideas. She needed to do something to remind him who was really in charge. Then it hit her. That pig. It was why she had called 911 in the first place. It was why Tom had humiliated her. And it was his weakness. On the morning of her plan, Maggie watched from her window as Tom left for work. He locked up his house, got into his car, and drove off. Perfect. She waited 7 minutes to make sure he wouldn't come back. Then she snuck out of her house and went to Tom's backyard. The fence wasn't very high, and with a little effort, she climbed over it. Her heart was beating fast as she landed on the grass, looking around to make sure no one saw her. Frankie, the white pig, was lying in the sun near the back door. The moment he saw her, he perked up, his tail wagging a bit, but he didn't move. "Come on, piggy," Maggie whispered, moving closer to him. "Let's get you out of here." She had already opened the gate to the street. All she had to do now was get him out, and he'd be free. "Here, boy," she called, pulling a pig treat from her pocket that she had swiped from a store earlier. She threw it towards him, but Frankie just sniffed it and stayed where he was. Maggie clenched her teeth. Dumb pig. She tried again, stepping closer this time, waving the treat in front of his nose. Frankie tilted his head but didn't move. Frustrated, she decided to be more direct. She reached down, grabbed his collar, and pulled. Bad idea. Frankie growled, a deep, scary sound that made her shiver. Sure, she hissed, starting to panic. She didn't want any neighbors to see what she was doing. She pulled again. Frankie barked, loud and clear. Maggie froze. Then, behind her, she heard something worse. The sound of a car coming into the driveway. Her blood turned cold. Tom had come back early. He had only gone down the road for a few minutes when he remembered he'd left his work laptop on the kitchen counter. With a sigh of annoyance, he turned around and drove back home. As he pulled into the driveway, he noticed something odd. The side gate to his backyard was open. His stomach tightened because he knew he had closed it that morning. His first thought was Frankie. Was he still in the yard? Tom quickly parked the car and got out, his heart beating faster. As he went around the house and into the backyard, what he saw made him furious. There was Maggie, 1 foot in his house, the back door slightly open, and one hand holding onto Frankie's collar. But the pig wasn't budging, growling low. When Maggie saw Tom, her face turned to panic. This isn't what it looks like, she stuttered, letting go of the pig. Tom didn't let her finish. Before she could run, he moved. In just a few steps, he caught her, grabbing her wrist to stop her from escaping through the gate. Oh, it's exactly what it looks like, Tom said. His grip tightened just enough to keep her there. You broke into my yard. You tried to steal my Frankie. His voice was calm, but he was really angry inside. Maggie struggled, trying to pull away. Let go of me. You can't touch me, she yelled. Tom let out a short laugh. See, that's the thing, Maggie. You're on my property, and I have every right to defend myself. She kept fighting, screaming for help, but no one came. The neighborhood was quiet. Tom looked down at some rope he had left by his porch earlier that week for fixing Frankie's leash. Perfect. With quick movements, he tied Maggie's hands behind her back, making sure the knots were tight but not too tight. You really want to call the police? Okay, let's call them now. Maggie lost it. She screamed and thrashed around, kicking everywhere. You're attacking me. You'll go to jail for this. Tom didn't listen to her. He took out his phone and dialed 911. Yeah, I have someone who shouldn't be here on my property. She tried to break into my house and let my pig go. I need police here now. Maggie's face turned as white as a ghost. Tom, I'm sorry. It hit her. She was the one being reported now, and this time, there was no way she could make up a story to help herself. She whimpered. Please, let me go. It was just a prank. Tom crossed his arms. Oh, really? Let's see if the police think it's funny. Soon after, sirens echoed through the neighborhood. The flashing red and blue lights filled the street as 2 police cars came up to Tom's house. Several officers got out, their hands near their belts as they walked over. Tom stood with his arms crossed, looking calm. Maggie, however, was a mess. Still tied up, her face was red from crying. She attacked me. She screamed as soon as the officers got close. This is against the law. I was just checking on the pig, and he tied me up like I'm some bad guy. One officer looked at Tom. Sir, can you tell us what happened? Tom nodded. I came home early and found her in my yard without permission. She was trying to let my pig escape. I had to hold her until you got here. He pointed to his security camera near the back door. And I've got it all on video. That shut Maggie up quickly. The officers looked at the camera, then back at Maggie. Ma'am, do you live here? One of them asked. Maggie swallowed hard. Number. Did the homeowner say you could come into his yard? She shook her head. One officer turned to the other. We've got breaking and entering, attempted theft, and harassment. Maggie lost it. You don't get it. This isn't fair. He's the criminal. No, ma'am. The officer cut her off. You are the criminal. Tom watched as they pulled Maggie to her feet and put handcuffs on her. I'm going to sue you, she screamed at Tom. I'll get a lawyer and you'll be in jail. My parents, they won't be able to help you, Tom said calmly. The officers took Maggie to the police car. Her protest turned into loud crying. I can't go to jail. I can't go to jail. She cried, tears streaming down her face. But the car door closed, muffling her cries as the officers locked her in. Tom took a deep breath. It was over. As the police finished up, neighbors started looking out from behind their curtains. Rumors spread. By the next morning, everyone knew what happened with Maggie. On community social media, in texts, in whispers at the local coffee shop. The HOA, which she used to be so proud of, cut ties with her completely. They made it clear that Maggie's actions didn't represent their community. Just like that, her whole world fell apart. Tom wasn't looking for revenge, but he couldn't deny how good it felt to see Maggie finally face the consequences. And as he sat on his porch, petting Frankie behind the ears while drinking his morning coffee, he smiled. Peace at last. If you like this story, share it with your friends and subscribe to the channel. The bigger we get, the more stories we can tell.